Welcome to the All Things Endurance podcast. I'm your host, Rick Prince, and I'm delighted to have on the podcast today Nick Hancock. He's the founder of Maximum Mileage Coaching. And I've gotten to know Nick over the last few years. He's attended the USCA conference. And I think one of the things that makes his story so compelling is that, like a lot of the coaches out there or aspiring coaches out there, um, his coaching journey started as a side gig. He was working full time, and then it evolved into a full time career for him. And I think a lot of the people that we find that come to USCA are in the similar boat where that's the end all be all goal is to be coaching for themselves, but they're not quite sure how to get there. So I think that this podcast will be pretty valuable for all those people looking to have a similar journey to Nick. So Nick, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. Yeah, pleasure to be on.
Yeah, Nick is joining us from the UK. So Nick, before we get into sort of the meat of this podcast, maybe you could just tell me and our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got into coaching, maybe even, your athletic background, how you got into running, so on and so forth.
Yeah, sure. Hi everybody. So yeah, Nick Hancock. I am based in the UK. I live just in the south of the country, just in a city near a city called Bath, about 100 miles from London. Um, and I did come to the conference. I had a great time at the conference. I learned a lot, and I'll start off by saying, yeah, I'm a huge fan of USCA. I've even had you on my podcast in the past to sort of shout from the rooftops about USCA and all the good things that you're doing. Yeah, and my athletic background is probably not as traditional as some of you guests that you've had on. I was very sporty as a kid up until about the age of 16. I played at a pretty high level in a game called cricket, which is like baseball but not like baseball. There are bats and balls involved. Played rugby, football, or soccer, as you guys call it. Again, pretty high level when I was a kid. Really, probably should have been playing professional cricket, but alas, I fell into probably the wrong circles in terms of the direction that was all going. I started working in hospitality, as as a Saturday job, my late teens. Started working behind a bar. I used to smoke quite heavily, drugs, all of that sort of stuff. And yeah, I mean, I had a great sort of 20 years in hospitality, and we can sort of dive into that in a little bit more later. But it was through a mental health crisis, quite frankly, that I sort of picked up running properly just over a decade ago. I would kind of, when I thought I should probably get myself fit, which was very sporadic over the course of that sort of 20 years. I would run. I'd run on the treadmill in the gym, try and keep myself fit and stuff, but it didn't really sort of take it that seriously. And yeah, I got into running just purely as part of my recovery through a suicide attempt, and fell in love with it pretty quickly, actually, to the point where not only did I start running, but literally a week later, I gave up cigarettes, stopped drinking,
Wow.
just only drinking the sort of levels that I was accustomed to, which was pretty much every day, not to
Hmm.
an alcoholic level, but um, really fell in love with running. In terms of the community aspect of it, we have something in the UK called Park Run. In fact, it's actually global now. It's a 5K every Saturday in your local park. It's free. I got into that. I went there 1 week, and I think my first one was like 34-minute 5K. Didn't pay too much attention to the time. Went back about a month later, and I did it in 26 minutes. And somebody said to me,
Mm.
"Ooh, you got a PB." I said, "Oh, what's one of those?"
Yeah. What's that?
A personal best. You beat your time from last week. I was, "Oh, wonder if I could beat it again next week, and then next week, and next week." And yeah, eventually I got myself down to just under 20 minutes. Um, and I said, if I get myself under 20 minutes, I must be ready to do a marathon. So I
Of
went from,
course.
local 5K to a marathon, and had a disaster. It was awful. I hated it, every second of it. But I came out of it going, I want to do that again, and I want to do it
Mm,
really well. So yeah, I then went about buying every running book under the sun, geeking out, trying to, understand more about running and how it could get better, and do my next marathon better. I got myself a coach, um, and yeah, I went from 420 marathoner to now I'm trying to get myself fit enough and fast enough to run a 2:35 at London in April
that's
next year.
awesome. That is
Um,
awesome.
so yeah, and 42 years of age as well. I'm also an ultra marathoner. I've got I've been on a few podiums and stuff. And yeah, so I did the CCC this year as well. Um,
Got it.
and yeah, as kind of part of my evolution, I guess, in terms of my evolution of my love of running. In my corporate career, I was in charge of learning and development. So I basically
Mm,
spent, most of the last 10 years prior to my coaching, and up until very recently, making sure that people knew what they were doing in their jobs and help them develop. And I think I just always had that kind of ingrained love of helping people to
mm.
get better at the things they either want or need to get better at. And I thought, well, I feel like I know quite a lot about running now, and so, yeah, I got my UK athletics certification. Sought out the USCA certification, and decided I'd actually start coaching people. And really, it was just the start of my the evolution of my love of running. Really, it was not kind of I want to do this as a full-time job.
Yeah, just
Um,
sort of trended that direction.
yeah, yeah, it did.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of how the coaching journey started. And yeah, it's gone quite far since then. So I
Yeah.
guess we'll talk more about that.
Yeah. Well, no, absolutely. Well, that's a good segue. I think a lot of people are in that boat where they are working a full-time job. They decided, okay, running is my passion. I really like to help others. Like you said, I'd like to start coaching. So they do it as a side gig, which can be challenging. I started USCA as a side gig as well. And I felt like every minute that I wasn't at my full-time job, I was working on developing this business, and it can be a lot. So I guess that's my next question for you. When you were at your full-time job, when you made that decision that, hey, I want to become a coach and I want to start coaching people, how was that balancing the two as far as time management, stress, whatever variables are involved there for you?
Yeah. So I guess for me, the coinciding of COVID and lockdowns and working from home, I think that the timing of that helped, because that was kind of when I started,
Okay.
thinking about this whole thing. So I mean, I would sit here at my desk with my corporate laptop to my left and my coaching laptop to my right.
I love
And
it.
there was a little bit of that in the beginning. In fact, there was a lot of that in the beginning, where sort of when I wasn't on Zoom meetings or writing reports or delivering virtual training sessions for my corporate job. Sort of during lunch breaks or you know, quick 5 minutes. Let me just have a quick look at my coaching laptop. The sort of in the beginning, the three or four friends, which is how I started. And I think like a lot
Mm.
of people,
Yep.
a lot of coaches will do is coach a few friends for maybe, 10, 15, $50 a month, or, whatever nominal figure we decide.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that was kind of how it started. And in the beginning, it was very manageable. I had training peaks and still have training peaks. And I was literally charging those sort of three or four people just enough to cover the cost of training peaks. And that was it.
Mm.
That was all, that was my only sort of outgoing. It's really kind of as time has gone on, I started getting results for those people, and then a little bit of word of mouth would go out, of, Nick, I've got a friend who has seen what you're doing with me. Would you mind speaking to them? And and yeah, it sort of started to develop more from a word of mouth thing over the course of the sort of first 9 to 12 months, and it
Okay.
was still very manageable. I might do some bits and bobs in the evening, um, but like yourself where, things really start to ramp up, particularly in the last 6 months before I did make the leap. It was chaos. In
Mm,
terms of chaos from a very limited time balance of, being able to do, I'd be up until 1 o'clock in the morning doing coaching
sure.
plans, or vice versa, doing the corporate job late at night, either way around. So it was pretty, yeah, sort of like 18 hours a day,
Yeah.
type stuff.
Yeah. So what was the inflection point then, if you remember, as far as the number of clients that you had, number of athletes that you had, when it sort of tipped the scales from, okay, this is manageable to, oh my God, now I'm up till 1 in the morning.
Yeah, I think the sort of the magic number, if you like, was probably about 20 athletes
Okay.
when I got to 20. And I was trying to one of the things I learned from an early coach was how not to do coaching.
Hmm.
Um, and I've always prided myself, and this is the thing with maximum mileage. When I talk to a new client, one of my unique selling points is my communication. I wanted communication to be amazing. I wanted feedback to be as professional as it could possibly be. To be on the end of a text anytime anybody needs it. And I really pride myself on the service I give as a coach, not just getting people the results, but actually the
Sure.
service behind it. And yeah, sort of when I got to about 20, that was sort of the point where I was like, right, we're not only am I starting to feel like the strain of the hours I was doing, but it was also around then, it was kind of like, actually, could I do this full time?
Yeah.
Could this actually be my job, not just my side gig? Although I never liked calling it a side gig, a side hustle. I don't
Yeah.
actually like that term because I feel like that's a disservice to the people that were paying me
Yeah. That's a good
uh,
point. That's fair.
some money. Um, so yeah, and I think it was about that point where I was like, okay, so I'm coaching about 20 people here. I was still coaching, I was still charging a very small amount of money per month. We're
Okay.
talking sort of 40, 45 pounds, which is 55, $60 a month. Um, and that wasn't sustainable. Certainly
Sure.
not, certainly not from a right. I'm putting in a lot of effort here. If this is going to be full time, then I need to, really start thinking about this as a business now, not just you know, as a side hustle.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So I think one of the other things that I hear a lot, and again, I certainly went through this, was when you when you have that eureka moment that you did, kind of like, oh wait, what if this can actually be a full-time thing? Um, I think for a lot of people, it's a leap of faith. What I found is it's rare that people are like, okay, I'm making all this money now from, from coaching. I can just seamlessly go into it and, pay all the bills and I'm going to be comfortable and I found for most people that it's sort of like, okay, it's trending in the right direction. I love what I'm doing, so I'm just going to go for it. Was that similar where, like, it sounds like it was, where you weren't making the money that you were from your corporate job, from your full-time job, but there was certainly that hope that it would get there or at least near there, or maybe, exceed that where, okay, I can do this. Let's try it. Let's see what works. Um, and I think the other thing is maybe you could talk about is if there was any type of safety net, like, okay, what if this thing just bombs and, something happens? What do I do then? Because those were certainly all the things that went through my mind when I started my business. And I think it's a reality for most people, which a lot of people don't talk about. It can be a pretty scary, daunting thing. So maybe if you could sort of elaborate on that from your experience.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I don't think I sort of went with a leap of faith. There was it took me best part of 3.5 years to get to a point where it was making enough money for me to be able to make the transition.
Yeah,
I mean, I was pretty senior in my corporate role. The role I left was a good, very good salary.
sure.
Um, Plus all of the benefits that come with it, like private healthcare and a car and all of that sort of stuff, pension, etc. Or 401k, I think you guys
Yeah.
call it.
I want that job then. You can.
Yeah,
It
but
sounds good.
sort of part of the catalyst was So our position at home is fairly unique. My wife unfortunately has secondary cancer,
Oh,
and um, it sort of makes you things like that make you look at life and think, well, what really is important,
mm,
is
sure,
working 55, 60 hours a week in a corporate job for a company I don't really care about, or sector I don't really care about, which is where I was. I sort of was in that place. Um, it does make you think a little bit more about, do I want to live this kind of life, or do I want to really live my life?
sure,
And whilst, not making the sort of, I mean, my coaching business is making the sort of money that I was taking home as a corporate role. But obviously, when you take overheads and taxes and things out, it's not the biggest, it's not the salary that I was earning. Um,
sure,
but yeah, there was sort of part that way of thinking of actually, what, I'd love to do something that I love. I don't, there's not one moment of my day now that I feel is like this is a job, because it isn't.
mm,
I really do love this. And in terms of the safety net, we are very lucky with Alison, my wife's job. She is well. She's, you know, talk to us and they're like, oh my God, didn't you wouldn't look at her to think that there is something,
mm,
going on at all. She's very, very well. She has a very good sort of safety net, I guess, around her current role. She earns a very good salary. She's a group director of HR for a global company. So I guess I did have that safety net, I think you could probably call it. Um, and it was a big discussion between me and her around,
sure,
which, where do we want to go? And do I, because there was actually a point where it was, I either give up coaching or I give up the corporate job. Which one is it going
yeah,
to be? Which one,
yeah,
one of them has to give, because, those 18-hour days we're starting to hurt. Um, so yeah, I think, everybody's position is obviously very different, but if there's one thing I would say to, anybody listening around, how do you do this alongside another full-time job is, if you really want to do it, I would say go for it, because life is short. We
yeah,
all have our different things going on, and do we really want to live a life that we have been had put in front of us, or do we want to carve out the life that we really want?
yeah, yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that. My father passed away from cancer, and it was sort of a turning point from a mental standpoint, exactly what you said. He was a university professor. He was sort of I think like a year away from retirement. And it wasn't like he was waiting for retirement, to live his life. They would have had to drag him kicking and screaming out of his office. He loved it there. But just a simple fact that, like, you don't know what the future holds. And,
Mm,
if you want to do something, you should go for it. And I think it's interesting you said that. Um, about your wife, because I had a similar sort of response to when my father passed away, was that same response, like, what are you waiting for? That
mm,
that could be you in a year or two. You just don't know. You don't know what the future holds. Um so it sounds like it was sort of like you said, sort of an evolution where, like you said, you had enough clients and it was just, okay, what am I going to do here? Am I going to go the coaching route, or the full-time job route? And I think it's important to say, you mentioned the 18-hour days, and I think that's a really important thing to discuss, because a lot of people want things, but I don't want to say they're not willing to put in the work, but they don't realize how much work it's going to take. And I think to really, I really appreciate you saying that, because I'm not saying everyone needs to put in 18-hour days to make it a
mm.
full-time
No.
gig, but I think it's important. It drives home the point of how much work really is required when you're trying to balance a full-time job, get your coaching practice up and going to the point, let's say, where you want it to be full-time, and then family, friends, and all the other dynamics. I know you have two kids. It's a lot. It's a lot. And I think that people really have to kind of manage their expectations, that you're not going to have a lot of free time, and when I've done podcasts with other coaches who are in similar places and talk to other coaches, they oftentimes they said, look, I love what I do for a living now. I think it was Heather Hart and her husband, Jeff, but I personally don't, they personally don't get to run as much or personally don't get to train as much. So there are these sort of little sacrifices that come along the way that sometimes you have to make to get that goal that you want as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I think at the USCA conference, I said, I grinded away alongside that
Yeah.
corporate job, and yeah, there are things that you do end up sacrificing. I don't have many friends anymore.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't come out. I've got training to do or coaching to do.
Yeah.
Um, um, yeah, I think one thing I'd say, I think we'll probably end up sort of talking about this kind of thing of what sort of tips might I give people. But I think one thing that definitely helped me was because it was for a very long period of time, probably at least the first 2 years, I was trying to do everything myself. Like I
Yeah.
would be get in the beginning where I only had a few clients and I could kind of manage it. There was also in the beginning, I'd go, well, okay, I'm pretty cool with the client side of things, but I want a website. Well, I don't have any money to pay a
Yep.
web developer, so I'll do that myself. Oh my
Sure.
God. Stuff and stuff like that. Things that, would take a professional a week to do, were taking me, 3 months to do. God, trying to learn WordPress,
Yep.
which is the first platform I had my original website on. And then learning about SEO. I would, lie awake, for an hour after going to bed at already kind of midnight, on my Kindle, reading books about SEO and how SEO works and
Yeah.
how to write blogs and keywords and stuff like that. And you try and turn yourself into this all encompassing, particularly for somebody coming from a corporate role where, my job was learning development. There were marketing
Yep.
people, there were finance people, there were operations people. You become all of those things.
Sure. Instantly.
It like literally instantly. Yeah.
Yeah.
You are your chief financial officer. You are your chief marketing officer. You are your chief officer, chief
Yeah.
sales officer, all of that stuff. Um, writing your own content for social media and selling your soul to the devil on there. Again, I'm sure we'll talk more about that,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think I sort of those first couple of years, and as the client started to grow, I did realize, you know what, you've got to start farming some of this stuff out.
Yeah.
Um, and there's some great stuff out there these days. Things like Upwork and Fiverr
Yep.
have
Yep.
been amazing. I had a meeting earlier with the guy who developed my current website. Fantastic. Found him on Upwork. Very good price. And then there's resources like USCA have got with Thrive Hive and everything. So there's so much out there, and that's sort of one of the things I would say to people is that if you really, really do want to try and get that end goal of going full time with your business, or even if you did want to keep it on the side, if you've got a stable income and you're working an already sort of good um corporate role or full-time role or whatever it might be, is whatever kind of profit you make from your coaching business in the beginning, don't be afraid to invest it back into things, because if I hadn't done all of that in the beginning, I don't think I would have been able to make the leap I have now, because I don't spend a lot of time um in my business. I spend time on my business and with my coaching. Everything
Yep.
else I sort of fish out to third parties.
Yeah, I think that is the most valuable advice that probably anyone could give someone starting off in their journey. And I think it's a mistake that most people make. I certainly did. And I think, if you don't have the financial resources, you certainly can't. But I think time is money, and the reality is what would have taken you 6 months to do that a professional could have done in 6 minutes. Not only that, but
Yeah.
there's what they could have done in 6 minutes would probably be better, right? Like that's what I've learned. And so
Yeah.
that's what I did. As soon as I had enough dollars, I said, okay, we're gonna hire this person. Um, I think there's also a control issue for some people. I know it was for
Mhm.
me, like I was drowning. I was doing everything on my own, and then COVID hit. And I knew for a long time I needed to hire someone else, and the business was making money, but not quite enough where I could justify bringing on another headcount. And then every day in the news, my wife's not involved in the business at all. We have at that point I was probably a 3 year
Likewise.
old. Yeah. And every day in the news was, another million people died of COVID today, another million, and I'm like, oh my God, what if that's me? What if I die of COVID, and my wife knows
Mhm.
nothing. So it took that for me to hire somebody. That's how stubborn I was and much of a control freak. And that's when I brought on Cindy, which was by far the best business decision I ever made in my entire life. But it's hard, I think, letting go sometime of control. And it's also hard letting go of money. You're like, oh, but that's, I'm putting out $500 that I could have kept for myself. But the long play, or sometimes the short play, is that you get that money back in spades, but
Yeah.
it's hard to sometimes when you're first starting a business to see that money going out instead of into your bank account and staying there. So I applaud you for having that realization and going that route because and I think you worded it so well that you're not working in your business, you're working on your business. And I think so many people just get stuck in the business and grinding with all the minutia of, SEO and accounting and lawyers and all, or all those type of when or legal type matters when they could, consult a lawyer, go on Upwork, go on Fiverr, do whatever, So yeah,
Yeah.
good for you.
Yeah. I mean, yes, and just sort of to your point around, sometimes you can't see that kind of that future dollar return. Because it's not just dollars, it's also, your time expense as well.
Sure.
The time you spend, 6 months trying to develop your own website where,
Yeah,
what else could you have been doing in that 6 months? You could have been
right.
finding more clients, um,
Absolutely.
finding better clients, really understanding more about what kind of client you want to work with, because that was another sort of mistake I made in the beginning, trying to be everything to everyone.
Yep.
Um, um, So from a sort of financial standpoint, this is kind of one of the things, once I had maxed myself out on the whole SEO thing, I thought, right, I've got to start. I know how important this is. I'm just gonna have to bite the bullet and pay for somebody to do it. And I started investing. I think my first SEO guy was about £300 a month, which was basically all of my profit at the time.
Yep.
We're talking sort of $400 a month. That was all of my profit at the time. But now I have 40 clients, and over the years, I've sort of maintained, over the last 2 years, I've maintained about 80% of my client base comes from Google search.
That's awesome. That is
So
awesome.
it pays for itself. I'm sort of quite happy to spend that kind of money on SEO,
Yeah.
because it does return.
Yep. Yep. So that's actually a great again sort of segue into the next question. And obviously you've already addressed some of these things. Maybe if you could discuss the SEO stuff and maybe some other things. Um, So how do you attract, so what are your main strategies for attracting and retaining athletes? Obviously, as you noted, I think the best thing is word of mouth always, right? And getting results for your clients. That's the huge billboard out there. Aside from that, and in the Google search, what are some other strategies that you've done over the years, whether it be from the inception of when you started it part-time to the point where you are now? Because I think that's one of the areas that a lot of new coaches and senior and seasoned coaches struggle with is the acquiring and the acquisition of athletes.
Yeah. Obviously, one of the, I guess, I wouldn't say easiest places, but the most obvious places to start is obviously social media. Um, whether you have 100 followers or 100,000 followers, I think you need to be on social media, because whether you actually get clients from social media, and I know, just talking to a few of the guys at the US conference, they get all of their clients from social media. I probably only get about 10% of my
Okay.
clients from social media. But it doesn't matter where your clients are coming from. I think you have to be active and consistent on social media and putting value out into the world, because that's your shop window. Because even if I have somebody who comes via Google, 99 times out of 100, they will say, I found you on Google, but then I went onto Instagram to have a little look at,
Hmm.
what you're about on Instagram. Because, you might have this fantastic looking website that's all about running and how good a coach you are and all the results you've got on people. But that social proof is very real, and people want to see that. And that's one of the best places for, I think, people to go is is on social media, because if they go onto your social media and it's just me taking selfies, or which you don't want, um, you know, taking selfies or pictures of my kids or dogs. Okay, that's nice, but it's not going to get you clients.
Yeah.
So, my social media is very geared towards putting value out into the world, showing people what I offer, the results I get for my clients. And so I think that's super, super important. And obviously a very quick and easy way, because, we all, pretty much everybody has some form of social media. Um, I would say as well, with the social media part, is understanding who you want to work with and where they hang out. Because I think if you want to work with, I don't know, let's say, so in my case, like my sort of demographic is parents, busy professionals over 30, 35, who want to run marathons and ultra marathons. Um, so, I tend to find those kind of people are on Instagram and LinkedIn. So
Yeah.
those are my two platforms that I probably spend most of my time on. I don't really spend any time on Facebook anymore, purely because I don't like the algorithm, and the way it works.
Yeah.
But for me, it would be a total waste of my time hammering Snapchat,
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah.
My clients are not on Snapchat.
Yeah. TikTok or
um,
something like that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
TikTok can be a good growth engine, but I tend to I don't think I've ever had anybody come from TikTok. I am on there, but it's more of I just put on TikTok what I already put on Instagram anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that would be, yeah, the sort of the first place. Um and then I would say it is worth investing in SEO. I've had good success from, like, in fact, most of my success has come from my website. I think it does show a good deal of professionalism. The amount of people that say, "Oh, I love the look of your website," not just the look and feel and the professionalism of it. It's not just I've actually had it quite well designed, and UX and UI and all of that good stuff put into it.
Sure.
I think that is really important. Um, so yeah, those are sort of some of the real starting points of where I would look to, or where I have got clients from. Word of mouth is always good, but and I do get people from referrals. In fact, I spoke to somebody earlier that was a referral. But I think if you sort of want to put as many people in the top of your sales funnel as possible, you've got to start with, with getting eyes on you. And whether you like it or not, social media is the place.
Yep. Yep. You mentioned something which I think is so critically important, which is consistency. Um, I read some statistic, and I think it was regarding blogs, that something like 90% of the blogs out there only have one or two posts. And I think there's this unrealistic expectation that I put a great podcast out there, I put a great blog out there, and the world's going to flock to it. There's this one guy on LinkedIn who has a podcast. This guy Anthony Walsh. He's actually over in, I think he's based in London actually, but he's this cyclist, and he put his stats out there one day. It said it took me like 50 podcasts before I got 10 listeners, and then another 50 podcasts before I actually had enough money to buy an actual microphone. And it was just so great. And now he's incredibly popular and successful, but it was really great to see that, because I think a lot of people, I think when they think, of Joe Rogan, or they think of, this guy Anthony Walsh, they think, oh, they must have just come right out of the gate. But the reality is you just got to keep putting it out there in the universe, and you got to put the work in, and eventually, people find it and they find value. But it's the long game. You got to play the long game, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's the thing with social media. It's almost become a bit of an economy of, if you want to go viral, get your followers. And I mean, I always say, I don't really care how many followers I've got. It's how many people are actually going to buy my services.
Yeah.
You could,
Uh,
you could have
100%.
200,000 followers on Instagram. If no one's buying, if no one's coming to you and saying, "I want you to be my coach," or "I want to buy one of your plans or your services," or whatever it might be, what's the point in having 200,000 followers?
Yeah. Yeah.
There is no point. So no, you're right. I think consistency, value, I was going to say that sort of economy of social media. It's almost like you have to be either controversial or sensationalist to
Yeah.
go viral these days.
Yeah.
If that's your bag, if that's how you want to try and attract people, then go for it. But I think if you want to sort of portray yourself as a credible coach out there in the world, and I hear this all of the time from people that, oh, it's a saturated market. I disagree. I totally disagree. And the reason I disagree is because how many people in the world run marathons, ultra marathons, do triathlons, cycle? Millions, millions and
Yeah.
millions and millions and millions. Way, way, way more than, all of us coaches could handle.
Yeah.
I'm not looking for millions of coaching clients. I need 40,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and I'm sure most sort of people listening to this would be, there or thereabouts. So I think, one of the things I would say is that I think your limiting beliefs can be your limit.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah, I hear that a lot as well. And for what it's worth, oftentimes US is often the blame, right? Especially in the ultra running, because we're the only ultra running certification. We certify, we've certified quite a few people. And but you're right. Like, and I think even if you take sort of a deeper dive, like you mentioned earlier, you're looking for the parents that are over 30. Maybe I'm looking for, people in their 20s. Maybe I'm looking for people that want to do over 100 miles. You're looking for people in the 50 miles. So every coach out there is often looking for a slightly different demographic. And it's interesting you said that. When I hear that as well about the saturation of the market, I always just think about other industries. Like think about how many attorneys are out there, how many, all these other professions, I'm not sure about in the UK, but in the US, like the trades, like electrician, plumbers, they're really in need of people in the trades.
Mhm.
Yet, you look in the phone book or, well, now online, and there's hundreds of people in my area doing it, and there's still a need for it. So, it's interesting. I have a similar feeling about the saturation. It's like you said, when you do the math, when you do look at the statistics, however many millions of people are doing all these activities based on how many coaches, it's definitely not a saturated market. It's definitely not a 1-to-1 ratio. That's for sure.
Yeah. Completely agree. And I think if you are confident and proud of your services and you put that value out into the world, I think you have nothing to worry about. I think you will find that you will grow. It might be slow at the start. It might
Sure.
feel like, every time you open Instagram, you've got 40 posts of 40 other coaches. Do you know what I would say? If you're following loads and loads and loads of coaches on Instagram, delete them because you're
Yeah.
seeing the wrong people. You want to
Yeah.
be engaging with the people that need your services, not connect with other coaches on another platform.
Yeah.
um the USCA Facebook group is a great place to connect with other coaches. You don't necessarily all need to follow each other on Instagram. uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, just sort of going back to your point around my sort of attraction model is that consistency, putting value out into the world. In terms of retaining, it is that service. I really pride myself on my service. The feedback that I give to my athletes, every Monday I sit and I do a Loom recording for all of my athletes of what I can see on Training Peaks. I talk them through, maybe only be sort of 3, 4, 5, maximum sort of 10 minutes video of, this is what I can see in your data. This is why I've changed this. This is what you told me subjectively. This is the feedback you gave me. I do that on a Monday. That's a really sort of absolute non-negotiable for me. Is that every week my athletes get that feedback, and
That's
then my line
amazing.
of communication is open. I really, really pride myself on that service. I always say I'm not a plan writer. Yes, your plan will be in Training Peaks, and off you go and follow that plan. But I'm not a plan writer. I'm a coach, and I'm here to serve you. And I think if anybody who does want to be a coach or is a coach can sort of hold their head up high and say, yes, my service is good. There will be hard times, like, in sort of in North America, you guys have a fairly traditional off season, don't you?
We do.
Uh,
Yeah.
and we talked about this in the conference where, you will have those natural dips. I'll have a natural dip after the London the spring marathons, London, Manchester, etc., happen in the spring. Boston, I always have a natural dip once a few people finish,
Sure.
but I think I'm seeing less of those dips in the last couple of years since my business has become more established. People want to stay on, and I think
Yeah.
you'll find that if you can really, really, if you want to retain your customers, talk to them, and that's what I call them. I know we use the word clients a lot in our industry. I prefer the word customers,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I am
And
giving them a service.
yeah, and I think that's such a, the cream always rises to the top. The fact that you do those Loom videos, you people, it doesn't take, I mean, even within this short amount of time we've been speaking, I can see that you genuinely care for your athletes, for your customers. And that's so evident, right? I mean, like I said, I already obviously get this from you, and I'm not even one of your athletes. Um, and I think the other thing too, a lot of people talk about retention. My former career prior to starting Uesco was as a personal trainer, which is very similar to coaching, and the fact that it's time. Mine was one-on-one, but you can only do so much of that, or at least I could only do so much before you burn out. And it was also a little bit different, though, I would say, because people aren't training for an event per se; they're just doing it for health. But I was very clear, this is the cap of hours that I put in a week, to
Mm.
train. And that if they say, okay, I'm gonna stop training, like there's no guarantee that I can kind of start back up with you because I have to pay the bills, I have to, put new athletes. So I think it's important for people to appreciate the value that they have with their coach. And that oftentimes it's not just about that I'm training for Berlin or training for London. It's this sort of ongoing cycle. Because I know that is a big concern. And there are natural ebbs and flows, but I think you make a great point where you'll probably always have those natural ebbs and flows, but they're
Mm.
becoming less pronounced as time goes on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I always sort of pick up a few clients that are, customers that are doing London for charity, and that's kind of, they're raising money for charity, and they will do London, and then they kind of go off
Yeah.
on their merry way. But the last couple of years, particularly last year, was the year I really saw it, and that was another part of the catalyst of going full time was the drop off from the previous year was far less pronounced
Hmm.
because I had more people staying on. They were like, I've really enjoyed as my coaching has evolved. They were like,
Yeah.
this was way beyond everything I expected. I've actually signed up to an autumn marathon, or a lot of the time I get people going, "Oh, I've done London now." You know,
Now what?
I'm inspired by your ultra marathon or your ultra marathon athlete, so I want to do an ultra marathon now. And
Oh,
I've sort of
wow.
seen, so I tend to find I'm sort of retaining people that way.
That's awesome. So a little pivot here.
Mm.
So with respect to going full time as a coach, what are some of the mistakes that you have made that we could tell any of our listeners that to maybe either reduce or avoid? So, I mean, again, I know for me personally, I may still make mistakes on a second to second basis, probably.
Yep.
And I certainly made more than my fair share when I first started my business. So I think that would be a helpful area to discuss.
Yeah, I think realizing sooner that I needed help and I couldn't do everything myself. I think if I realized that maybe 12 months earlier, I could have been 2 years ahead
Hmm.
in a way. So I think, yeah, that would sort of be my first tip for anybody. Not to make the same mistake I did is realize you can't do all of this yourself. You can't be, the entire company. You have to, if you want to really focus on your athletes, you should farm things out and realize that there are so many avenues to do that. So any little bit of profit that you are making in the beginning, use it. Don't spend it on race fees or shoes, which is what I first started doing. That was
Yeah,
sort of part of the whole thing in the beginning
that's
was
the
thinking,
fun
well,
stuff.
I'm making a little bit of profit now. I don't have to ask my wife if I'm allowed to enter such and such a race, or I can just pay for it.
I love it. Let's do that.
Yeah. Why have you bought another pair of shoes? Oh, you don't have to worry about that now because it's coming out of my money.
Right. I love it.
So yeah, I think realize sooner, and there are lots of things that you can do to help. Um, like, I mentioned it already, Upwork, Fiverr. Um, I think my sort of second mistake, there are three I've thought of. So my second mistake is don't keep trying too many things. Get good at one thing first,
Hmm.
get consistent with it. And then if you want to try the next thing, because it can be so exciting. Like you could think, right, okay, so I want to coach athletes, but I also, coming from a hospitality background and, learning about nutrition and everything. And I was like, well, I don't want to eat chicken, broccoli, and rice all the time. So I started using my foodie head. And then I thought, well, I could write a book. But in the beginning, I was trying to write the book, which I now have two books on Amazon, the Ultimate Cookbooks for Runners, if anybody wants to buy
Oh,
them.
nice.
Um, but yeah, in the beginning, I was trying to do that and coach people and put training plans on the Training Peaks marketplace, and it can just completely spiral,
Yeah.
and then you just become not very good at a lot of things instead
Yeah.
of very good at one thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I sort of, I would say just really focus on getting good at the one thing before then thinking about how can you expand your offer. And then when you do want to expand your offer, get help. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I wrote all the recipes and methods and everything for my cookbook and all the words and stuff, but I wrote it in draft and then sent it to an editor and
Yeah.
spent $600 to get them to edit it. Um, because that would have taken, in fact, I did start trying it and it probably took me 3 hours just to do one page,
Right. Yeah.
you know,
It's grueling.
of a 200-page book. So,
Right.
um, so yeah, don't try doing too many things too quickly. And then I think the third one would be not not to get sucked into some of the promises of some of like these companies that say they can get you 50 clients in a month and get you to we'll get you to $10,000 within 30 days.
Yeah. They're everywhere these days.
Because yeah, exactly. They are everywhere these days. And quite frankly, they are total rubbish. And I have been sucked into a couple of them. I do work with a fitness business consultancy, um, who don't promise that sort of stuff, but they do help me write my social media
Yeah.
content. So that's kind of a big thing out of my mind. They do that for me. They write my marketing plans for me, but they also provide some of like the systems, um, automations, email lists, that sort of stuff. Because I mean, all of that can be, a real nightmare. But there are so many of these, yeah, people out there saying that they'll get you to, don't do it because they don't
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
You-
I mean, I feel like when it comes to that type stuff or any of that stuff, that old saying, if it sounds too good to be true, it likely is. I think that really
Exactly.
holds true. I get fed all these ads on Facebook, and one of them is uh was it create and launch your own course in one day.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I'm like, really? It took me 3 years to or 4 years to do that, and you're doing it in a day? Like,
Yeah.
again, obviously, it's sexy, it sounds great, and then they promise you'll make $1 billion overnight. And because I think you people get bombarded with this all day, it's almost like, well, God, everyone else must be doing this. Everyone else must be,
Yeah. Right.
getting 10 clients a day. And here I am struggling. And it's like the allure of it is really heavy, especially when you're trying to do what you did.
Mm.
But that's great advice to kind of just too good to be true, focus on what works, do it with integrity, do it the right way. Um,
Exactly. And it goes to things like, obviously we've got the advent of AI now. And all of a sudden, Chat GPT comes out, and a month later, there are, like, from an SEO perspective, there are 30 platforms that, like, I think one's called Jasper, profess to write blogs for you.
yeah,
And then, okay, you get sucked in, you're like, right, okay, you do your first one, like, wow, that's pretty good. And then, you probably spend a month on there and you spend 70 bucks on the subscription fee. And the amount of times I've done that and then gone, sort of 5 blogs in, it's like, this is getting a bit samey and
yeah,
obviously AI.
right.
And I think I mean, just today, actually, I've just tried something called Motion, not Notion, Motion,
Okay.
which is like an AI personal assistant. It's
Mm.
supposed to help you manage your diary. So I gave it a try, gave it access to my diary, and I was like, oh my God, what's it doing to my diary? But yeah, there are just so many of these things out there now, and I time and time again have found myself going, oh well, that was a waste of $100,
Yeah.
and just going back to doing things with integrity. Yeah, I think AI and things are definitely helpful, but yeah, I think that whole if it's too good to be true, it probably is,
Yeah.
does tend to override things in the end.
Yeah. Completely agree. Um, so again, with knowing that, you have a wife, you have two kids, you're obviously training, you're still training for your own races, plus you're coaching. How do you do it? What advice would you give to to others out there, to some of the listeners, that how do you balance this? How do you, stay present for all these different things and not, because I know for me personally, that's always hard. It's like when I had a regular job, or, I also kind of did corporate stuff. And when I sort of clocked out for the day, my mind sort of clocked out, versus now I find myself when I'm eating, when I'm trying to go to sleep, when I'm out for a run, I'm always thinking about,
Yeah.
the business. And maybe that's just what it is. But how do you do it? How do you manage all these different elements of your life now that you're running your own business?
Yeah, I think again, sort of going back to our personal situation, I've I've had to put myself first so that I can help, my family. Um, and I say this to my customers, my athletes. Um, I say it on social media and stuff. I think if you can't look after yourself, you can't look after other people, and you've got to make time for yourself. There are 24 hours in a day, 8 of which you should be sleeping for. So call it 16 hours. Just one of those hours, just one, has got to be for you. And for me, that is running. That
Yeah.
is, that is my health. The performance is almost kind of secondary to me, really. It's, obviously I am trying to perform as best as I can, running wise, but really it's just sort of, making sure I have that hour in the day, um because if you don't have it, it is impossible to do everything else. It's impossible to switch off from work. I think that, in fact, my rest days, like any of us endurance athletes, rest days, I'm like, that's probably my worst day. That's probably the day where I am lying in bed at night thinking about the business and stuff. I can tell I haven't exercised.
Yeah.
So be brutal about that hour or two a day, and then if you're doing your longer stuff on the weekends, be brutal about it. Say, I must have that, and make sure that your family buy into it as well. In the beginning, I think me and my wife would have conversations. Yeah, they still happen from time to time that, oh, you're going off for a 3 hour long run. But now she knows how important it is. And um, so I think you've got to make that time for yourself
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
probably my sort of my biggest thing, from a health perspective, from a being able to help the rest of the family perspective, being a nice human being. If I don't exercise, I'm not a nice human being.
Right. Yeah. No, I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah.
What it was interesting that job I had previously, one of the jobs I had, I managed the corporate gym for Goldman Sachs, and these people are all like super high performers. And it was interesting what I found just by talking to people is generally the more senior they were, the more, partner or senior managing director, they would literally put in their schedule just like they would any other important meeting,
Yeah.
like workout, and they go
Yep.
to the gym, and it was no more or less important. Well, maybe it was more important, but it was just part of their day. It wasn't something they had to make time for. It was just like, oh, I got to go to this meeting. I also have to go to the gym, and that was. And what I noticed was that, again, maybe it's because of their seniority as well, but the younger ones, the more junior people, they didn't do that. And I feel like as you get older, at least I, same as myself, I've realized the importance of kind of looking out for number one. And it's hard to do sometimes, even though, like you said, there's
Mm.
however many hours in a day. I think a lot of people, myself certainly, it almost, there's a level of guilt, like, oh gosh, like I know my wife's down there taking care of the kids, or I could be cooking dinner, or there you kind of have to get over that hurdle and being like, you
Mhm.
have to do this, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think, yeah, I mean, I certainly saw it in the corporate world as well. I think maybe there is a little element of, well, I'm senior, I can block that time out in my diary
Yeah,
because I get to call the shots. But also, I think as I've gotten older, I've, not just because of our personal situation, but also just from a personal perspective, that I have realized that you've got to look after your health. I think
yeah,
we're probably a bit more flippant about that
yeah,
in our younger years,
yep.
and we're like, no, 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 I'll just work through it, and you know, I need to prove that I'm good at this job or what have you. But I think you've just got to. I even did it when when the business was getting bigger. Plus, I was still doing my corporate job. I was still taking that time out in my day to do my run or get in the gym.
That's great.
um, and did exactly that. I put, I block off 90 minutes in my diary every day. 15 minutes to get changed, 15 minutes to have a shower afterwards, and the hour in between. And yeah, okay, I'll probably sit and work whilst I'm eating my lunch and
Yeah,
things like that. So there is a little bit of multitasking going on, but I think you've got to make that time.
yeah, yeah. No, I completely agree. I completely agree. So now that you're in this full-time coach role, this is your job. It's how you pay the rent. What do you like least, and what do you like most about it?
Hmm. I would. So definitely, in terms of what I love most about it, I I'm very blessed with the group of athletes I coach. We have a WhatsApp group for the group as well, so there's a nice sort of community aspect behind it. And I think I say I'm lucky with the people I coach and how they, not just them as individuals, but them as a group. But I think that's kind of down to the fact that I have niched down. I don't work with people that perhaps I don't connect with anymore. I don't just go and take, oh yeah, they want me to be their coach. I actually, I've gotten very much stubborn with myself to say, look, that client is not right for you. Don't work with them.
Yeah,
You know? So yeah, I mean, I love my group of athletes. I really do. I love them as people and the goals they have, and I really buy into their goals. Their goals are just important to me as they are to them. Um, so yeah, I definitely say that. What I like least is probably always going to be the lead generation
yeah,
side of things,
yeah,
but I spent a good bit of time working in sales training, and I think one of the things I've tried to really sort of not just convince sellers that I was working with in the past, but also myself now, as effectively somebody who's trying to sell their services, is not to think of it as sales, because sales can be quite a scary word for some people.
yeah,
People who aren't salespeople, it can be quite scary. So um, don't think of it as you're trying to sell your services. You're trying to solve a problem for these people,
yeah,
and they just so happen are going to give you some money for that.
yeah,
So don't be afraid to talk about money. I think it's probably the least favorite part of the job of the business, but I don't think I'm not uncomfortable with it anymore.
yeah.
In the beginning, when I was like, "Oh, is it okay if I charge you £20 a month?"
Right.
Yeah, now I'm like, it's £200 a month.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, but it's, and again, I think sort of going back to some of the mistakes I've made in the past, and I would, in fact, I said this to somebody at the US conference who was asking about it, is don't compete on price. I think you can get dragged into, um, oh, well, that coach charges that coach charges that. Don't compete on price, because we all do things differently and
yeah,
people will value things differently. And I think that's where you need to be competing on, is what value do you bring to the person that um, that you're speaking to.
yeah,
So don't cut yourself short. Um, yeah, charge what you're worth, what your services are worth, not what you think because you could say, oh, that coach over there charges, $50 a month, but their service could be terrible.
Yeah.
They might not do Loom recordings every Monday. They might not have an open line of communication. They might not have a community group. They might literally be writing a plan on Training Peaks, and they're not talking to their athlete for 6 weeks
Yeah.
at a time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Completely. Yeah, I think when like you said, when you compete on price, it's like a race to the bottom.
yeah.
There will always be those athletes that are charging, $10 a month or whatever. And like you said, you're not quite sure why. Maybe they're just starting out, like kind of like you did initially, and they're just trying to,
Mhm.
get some experience. Like you don't know why. So yeah, if you compete on price, I think it's a dangerous model. Like you said, you have to appreciate the value you provide, put a price to it, and be good with it.
Yeah.
But I think it is a scary thing because I think it's like there's a little bit of imposter syndrome there. I think for a lot of
Yeah.
people, like, well, am I really worth this? And if that's the case, if you're having that thought, really, that's a conversation you need to have with yourself and being like, well, are you really worth that or not?
Mm.
What are you really putting out there? So yeah, I appreciate that perspective on things because I think that's an area pricing that a lot of people get hung up on,
Yeah.
for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. And ultimately, it is just a price. It's a number. I think without that context of what value do you bring, it will always just be a number. That's why I don't actually put my price on my website. I want to talk to people first. I want to, display, what it is and how what it is I do and how I do it and how I help people
Yeah,
solve the problem that, they're coming to me with, which is, whatever it might be. So I've got no accountability for myself, or I don't know how to construct a training program or whatever it might be. That those people are coming to you with a problem. They
yeah,
don't they don't want to coach 99% of the time. There might be people that want to coach for the status symbol of it, but 99% of the time people are coming to you with a problem and you're
yeah.
there to solve it.
Yeah. Yep. And everything I've ever read about selling, for lack of a better word, there's always that main theme. Don't sell your product, sell the solution you're providing, right? Address the problem, sell the solution. And I think it's hard because, and I think most people do the opposite way. Like they put on the website, here's what I offer, boom, 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 versus coming at it from the problem side. Here's how I
Mm.
can solve your problem. Here's what I can do for you, and that's what speaks to people. But it's interesting, how many times I've read that, and even when we just redesigned our website, I was still inclined to be like, well, here's all the things that USCA offers. So it's something that I think that people really need to focus on is the problem solving part. I think you hit the nail on the head on that one.
Yeah.
So in closing today, I saw on your website that you have another coach that works with you.
Mm.
um, I think one of the questions that we get certainly at USCA is, okay, my threshold is 30 athletes per month. I'm at 29. What happens when I reach 30? I want to still keep growing my business. I want to keep doing all these things, but um what do I do? Should I bring on another coach? How does that work? So if you might be able to discuss um any advice that you might have to coaches who are at that threshold and things to consider when bringing on another coach. Should they bring on? Should they not? And if they do, sort of what are some things that they should be thinking about?
Yeah. So Faye, who is just about to finish her USCA running coaching certification, so she will be in the group soon. But she's got a myriad of certifications through UK athletics, and she is also incredible on female athlete health,
Hmm.
with lots of certifications in that. So I knew she was educated in it. She was running more sort of group trail running um, retreats and that kind of thing in Wales, and she actually reached out to me through Google. She was one of my Google clients, uh,
Okay.
to get some coaching for herself. She's a very, very good mountain sub ultra athlete. She's been on the Golden Trail series, and she's won various different races. And yeah, she sort of came to me. She'd actually gone through quite a bad bout of long COVID, and I actually got
Hmm.
got to know Faye through being her coach. And as I got to know her more over the course of about 14 months, I I did get to that point where I was like, right, I I could do with thinking about getting another coach on board. And it wasn't from a perspective of I was getting overloaded with inquiries. It was more of a um, growing the footprint of the business and the visibility of the business. And, Faye's quite active on social media herself. So there was sort of partly some of it was a marketing aspect, um, but quite frankly, I just liked Faye. I just really, really liked her. I got to know her really well. And I said to her, look, I'd love to ask you if you'd like to be a coach at Maximum Mileage. So I'd gotten to know Faye that way. Um, there are some mistakes I have made on other coaches' side of things. So, and I got a bit too keen when somebody reached out to me in the early-ish days, probably in the first 2 years, and they'd sort of seen my website and my activity on social media and stuff. And they did reach out to ask me if I'd mentor them, and I got a bit too excited. Within sort of a month of talking to this person, I said, do you want to be a coach of Maximum Mileage? And then, unfortunately, things were kicking off with my wife's health, and I had to say to that person, I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to, try and focus on what I'm doing and my wife's health. And that person turned out to be a little bit unsavory about the whole thing. So
Mm.
I think my sort of lesson learned there was really get to know people before you decide to start asking them, to be in, part of your business, because ultimately, Faye is an amazing ambassador for Maximum Mileage, and I absolutely trust her 100% with anything to do with the business and her practices. And the feedback I get or hear from her, the athletes that she works with, is phenomenal. So um, I think that's my sort of overarching advice: is really get to know the coach that you are taking on board. Don't rush into it. Um, Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit different if you're a very established business, like a CTS, for example, where they're going through interview processes and things. But for when you're as small as I was then and still am, really, there is a big emotional connection to your business. And
Yeah.
if somebody does something, it can be quite damaging. It can be quite stressful.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's your baby, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's your brand. It's everything. Yeah, that's super super valuable information. I mean, I've certainly found that to be the case as well.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Yeah. So in closing, you had mentioned that that you've used Fiverr for SEO for your website. You work with someone probably in different areas as well. I think kind of going back to what we were talking about, that whole, get a million clients in one day kind of thing. There's so much noise out there when it comes to like developing websites, when it comes to SEO, like I mean, and it's probably the majority of it is garbage. So if would it be okay? I know we're going to put on the website, your website for maximum mileage coaching, but would it be okay if people reached out to you as well if they had any questions
Mm.
on, hey, who did you use on Fiverr for XYZ? Would that be okay to do?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
You can either get me on Instagram at Run with Nick, or my email address, nick at maximummileagecoaching.com, or maximummileagecoaching.com, and come through the inquiry page or
Okay.
contact page. Yeah. However, I think, yeah. Um, I've got some good contacts, sort of for anybody who's starting off that is perhaps on a quite tight budget. There are some good resources, but equally, Rick, you guys are doing some great stuff with Thrive Hive and stuff as well. So,
Yeah. And so unfortunately we had to sunset Thrive Hive.
oh, did you?
Yeah, so
Oh,
we're yeah,
you can edit this
unfortunately.
bit out then.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, no, the platform that it was on, this is going back to some of the other things we talked about. The kind of the technology, but also the people behind it, the company behind it, they weren't as good with communication as we expected. There were
Okay.
some glitches with some of the technology, and we just didn't feel comfortable scaling it at that point. I think the
Yeah,
type of technology, it's sort of a little bit emerging technology. So I'm sure in the future, hopefully we can kind of get that going again. But at this stage, yeah, we decided to kind of we just didn't feel comfortable taking people's money, knowing that there could be an issue down the line. We felt like it would be
yeah.
better just to kind of shut it down, wait for the technology to catch up, and then sort of re-engage with it. But
And
um,
you know what, Rick? I think that is a really good point for everybody is to, when you are setting up your business and, if things don't go right, it's okay.
yeah,
Not
yeah,
everything's going to go
no,
perfectly. It really isn't.
yeah,
You're going to make loads of mistakes. You're going to try things. They're not going to work.
yeah. Yeah, and
It's
I think
okay.
it's really easy to say, but it's really hard to do is not to be not to get too emotional about these
Mm,
things. Like, and I feel like, having been in business now for myself for a while, like the decision to shutter Thrive Hive was almost there was no emotion, even though we put a lot of time and money into it. It was just like,
mm,
okay, this is what we're doing, boom, and you can't look back. You have to
mhm.
like make it very, this is what it is. Because yeah, you're going to make a ton of mistakes. Like
Yeah.
I said, I make mistakes every day, some bigger than others, but you just have to chalk them up as a learning experience and move on and not really dwell on it. But again, easier said than done, especially when you're new to a business where, if you have $100 to spend on your business, you just spent 50 and it didn't work out. That's 50% of your budget right
Yeah.
there,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you still have to be like, okay, that didn't work next. And just, so yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that because it's something that is, it's invaluable, I think, because if you dwell on things, it holds you back, and you don't progress at the speed. But that's why I was kind of I appreciate you allowing people to reach out to you because I think for me as well, there's so much because there's so much noise out there. You just spin sometimes. You're like, oh God, well, I don't. You just keep looking for that one right person, but they all sound right, and so you just it's sort of paralyzing. You don't do anything. So I've always found knowing someone that I trust, knowing that they could refer someone to me, whether it be or a server guy or a website or bookkeeper, whatever it may or may not be, was invaluable because again,
Mm,
like your business, you have more you believe that okay, this is going to be good and it reduces the amount of time spent scrolling in hours and hours trying to find that one web designer, that one right platform to find a web designer. So I really appreciate that.
yeah. No problem.
Um, all right, perfect. Well, so we will on the outro, we will have all your information there, again, as well as your contact information so people can reach out to you. I'd also like to say if any of the listeners are interested in a USCA certification, you can use the code ATE75 for a $75 discount. And Nick, this has been an absolute pleasure. I think, and I'm being honest when I say this, I think of all the all the podcasts we've had, all the blogs I've written, as far as getting started as a coach, I think this has been one of the most impactful because I feel like you hit on all the main points. I feel your, and I don't want to say pain, but I like relived all this stuff of starting USCA as you were talking. So this has been great. And yeah, I really appreciate your time on this, Nick.
Yeah. No, thank you, Rick. And I appreciate everything you do at USCA. It's been, amazing education. And I can see why you're being blamed for saturation in the market. But
Yeah.
you know what? At least you're educating the saturation.
Yeah,
You know,
we're trying.
exactly.
We're
Thanks,
trying,
Rick.
keeping it going. You got it. Thanks so much, Nick.